So
Okay.
Makes sense.
yeah.
Sounds good. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Let's roll. All right. Welcome to the Bay Vibes. Today we have a guest. His name is Peter. Peter, welcome.
Hello.
Um, it's cool to have you here. I had a chance to converse with him a couple of times. He's a very interesting individual, has a lot to say, has a lot of deep knowledge about different various subjects. So that was very cool to hear. So hope we can have a good conversation today. So I guess in order to kick this off, I was thinking if you could just, I guess, tell uh, tell us about yourself a little bit, and then like what's your story like, and whatever you'd be willing to share.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
great. First of all, thank you for inviting me onto your show. I've always found this type of experience very interesting, where various individuals in our very vibrant area can share their stories and their experiences. So myself, I am currently a young professional here in the Bay who works in EdTech. And after my formal education, I've gone to this type of line of work where I work with, various families and institutions on helping them facilitate their educational experience and via a technology type of platform. And so, we're in Silicon Valley. This is where the heart of the action is at for technology. And a lot of the things that I've seen that are in my space are very interesting. And I'm just glad, and I feel very lucky to be here, to be in the middle of the action for this.
When it comes to education, do you actually like educate people yourself, like a classroom scenario, or is it more like a platform that you, I don't know, like an app or something? What?
Yeah, so we are a startup, and so for that capacity, we wear multiple hats, and as such, we all, because of our background, we all kind of do multiple things, and most of us do indeed teach. We teach, and we consult, and at the same time, for example, myself, I'm also working on a electronic platform as part of the company. That's
So
my main topic.
you're an engineer as well?
My background is in technology related STEM field. However, I wasn't a formal engineer. However, I never thought I'd be in this position. But as my current work, I manage a lot of engineers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. And at what stage is your startup right now?
We're early stage. We're definitely early stage. However, we're growing very fast. And I'm sure probably a lot of your listeners have also heard of this book called 0 to 1, right? This is sort of one of the key books for startups. We have gone past the 0. We're about to get to 1, and we definitely survive our first year. So that's already, for at least to us, a big accomplishment.
Nice.
We see a bright future ahead.
What's the main idea of this platform? How is it different from any other platforms?
Yeah, we want to create a bridge where we help students connect with teachers who are very qualified but may not be easily accessible due to their geography. For example, everybody here in the States kind of sort of know, and I think this is more or less, just a fact that, for example, you have very good STEM education, basic STEM education, right, abroad, like in Asia, in other parts of East and South Asia and such. Well, a lot of the education system here in the States are lacking. And there's, I can go to a whole long talk about that, why it is. There's a lot of issues there. But we, as a third party, seek to solve or help with this problem by linking the resources from those places that have good systems with the need that is here, where parents and students, to a large degree, sometimes might feel frustrated and simply without solution on how to solve a system that is just simply not working.
Why do you think the education here is not as good?
Okay, so that's a big topic. Yeah, well, I mean, gosh,
Let me share what I feel about this one.
yeah,
I feel like this here in the United States, like there's this interesting approach to like teaching people. Like let's say, for instance, I remember like back in like Kazakhstan or post-Soviet Union, we used to be like it's very strict, right? You almost like knowledge is like shoved into your brain type of
yeah,
stuff, right?
yeah,
But here it's more like if you want to, we have all the tools available. And like if it sparks your interest, we're gonna give all the resources possible. Just like be my guest, just go for it. Like you have to earn it. You have to like do it yourself. So that's why you get these genius people like they're way too like crazy and specialized in certain like education, like I don't know, like math or something like that. But when you grow like this very strict, I feel like it's also like almost like you grow up, your general base knowledge kind of is higher, but you have this feeling that it's been like not your choice. It's been
right,
like almost like
right,
shoved up you, and that means like once you get to a certain level, like you don't have that passion to push it over, to the
yeah,
next level. So,
yeah.
what do you feel about that? What do you think about that?
Oh
Yeah.
gosh, that's the bread and butter problem of
Mm-hmm.
my industry,
Mm-hmm.
basically my field, right? And as somebody that knows about this deeply, this is a couple hours of talk right here, but
Absolutely.
just kind of finding the good place to get in on this problem. You gotta look at this holistically. What do I mean by that? History matters, right? History matters. What do I mean by that? Take your experience of the Soviet education. It came during the height of the Soviet Empire, first with foundational thoughts by Lenin, and then it moved on to evolutions that happened during Stalin. But one of the things that they really want to, there were a couple of things they really want to accomplish during that system, when they were designing this basic education system, right? So one was they want to focus on STEM, right? Because they saw that the Soviet Union was very much lacking the Western powers in terms of science. That's one thing they really wanted to solve quickly: how to train a country of largely illiterate farmers, peasants at that time, which was indeed the reality with Soviet Russia in the early days. How do we turn a country of largely illiterate peasants and superstitious peasants into a scientific and technological powerhouse
Mm-hmm.
in a very short time, and then to be able to staff the beginnings of a industrial base that's going to develop, and then that will make us to be able to at least stand head to head with the Western powers at that time, right? So that's a major goal. And second thing they want to do was, how do we increase the cultural foundations of the people in a very short time? And thirdly was they had to make this easily accessible to everybody. So it doesn't matter if you're in Kazakhstan, you're in Uzbekistan, or you're are in Buryatia, right? Or you're in Moscow. It doesn't matter where you are, you ought to be able to be brought to the same level, right? So there was a lot of thought that went into the Soviet system when they designed that education system. They actually pair psychologists with educators, and they brought or they studied in depth of the best German scientific academies at that time, their material, and they kind of integrated all into a whole, into a one unified whole, and they brought it to the Soviet Union. Well, they succeeded. That education system was very, very, very good, right? And as anybody that have went through that system, or anybody in the communist world, right, at one point, if they grew up in the communist world, they know it's very, very good. But of course, that wouldn't work here. Why? Because the rationale is different. The history of this country, of the United States, isn't at all the same as the Soviet Union, right? This is a country where everybody came for essentially two purposes. One, to make money, right? Two, to be able to do what they cannot do back home. Now, if we're talking about the pilgrims in the very beginning on the Mayflower, these were Puritans. They were a fringe sect of religious, ultra-religious people who, in many ways today, may be considered on the same extreme side as maybe the Taliban or something like that, right? They're they have a very, very strict and very fringe interpretation of their religion, of the mainstream religion. So they couldn't practice that in Europe, and so now so that's why they had to come here to the United States to escape and be able to do their thing. So this country developed on that basis, and so as a result, you have all sorts of ideas here, right? I tell this to my students. I say, look, there are from K to 12, from kindergarten to 12th grade, you largely have. You can put the various academic fields into two buckets. One is the STEM fields, and the other one is the humanities. Humanities including history, social sciences, and English literature, and such and such. So, as such, the way to teach somebody how to get into this field is very different. Whereas the humanities are all about how much you know, information, and most importantly, perspectives, right? Versus the STEM is about whether if you can deduce logically from first principles well enough, and that requires a very strict way of thinking through a situation. Okay, because of the nature of this country, to put the Soviet system onto this country, it's just not realistic. Because by definition, America is multicultural. And therefore, because of that, because of the nature of this country, it naturally fosters a ambience of multiple perspectives that coexist at the same time. And therefore, somebody that grows up here is much more inclined to be more humanities focused than STEM focused. I mean, that's just a nutshell, of course, but there's a lot more to that.
Why do you think it's important for the general populace to have more education than what's already being offered in this country?
Yeah, and that's a good question too. And education is a sort of thing where it's a strange. It's almost like a commercial product, right? Like the student has to put forth some kind of cost, right? Whether it be time or his own freedom, or it could be literally tuition, right? These are the costs that he puts up in order to get a product, which is education, which should ideally transform him. The classic educators say they should transform his soul, where he fundamentally becomes transformed spiritually into something else, right? So now, without going to that front, in a very basic sense, it should help you, it should teach you how to think. I mean, personally, and I think this is also, and this is definitely also true with a lot of people on my team, in my organization. We want to teach the student how to think correctly. Because in this day and age, information is no longer as valuable a commodity. With AI and with going on to Google, with Google literally on your fingertips at a click, right?
Yeah.
Click away. You can find anything, right? But how do you think through a situation, especially your decision making, on piecing together the puzzle and finding the right keywords to find and then look on Google? That's something that should be taught. Now, with that said, though, it's certainly the case that the classical liberal education is not necessarily necessary or the best for everybody. And what do I mean by that? I see one of the things I truly believe in, and a lot of people on most of the people on my team believe the same thing, is we want to help the student and the family find their passion. There's nothing wrong with a boy whose passion is, let's say, designing a car, right? Or his passion is to make a beautiful chair or table. Now, that's not traditionally part of the university ed curriculum. That's more something like a trade school. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, ultimately, the world needs people who are the best at something. And as long as this trait or this skill set is not harming others and not harming himself, as long as he's best at it, there's nothing wrong with that. And so, the best education, I think, ultimately should do those things. One is teach them how to think correctly and know how to make moral, good decisions, right? Secondly is how to find the right resources in society to help him or her further his goals. And thirdly, how to make himself the best at his passion. If someone that can do those three things, he went through a very successful education system.
Question.
Yeah.
When you test your students, do you give them this multiple choice tests?
Again, it depends on what their passion or what their goals are, right? Mm-hmm. We're very much goal oriented because we want to prepare our students for the new century and for the future. Mm-hmm. The future will be such that, one, information is no longer a valuable commodity. It will be mass accessible, right, to everybody. Secondly, it's also going to be very person-oriented. In other words, you're going to get cliques and you're going to have little cliques and niche of groups that are passionate about something. Mm-hmm. And this is going to be beyond borders. It doesn't matter if you're in Kazakhstan or in Russia or in China or in USA. There will be people who like, for example, skateboarding, right? Who like, what's that? It's a sort of calisthenics. It's where they jump off walls, like parkour, right? Mm-hmm. So you will have interest groups like that. And what we're looking at in this future is it's going to be a society where people are going to congregate based on their interests. And so based on that, we want to help the students prepare them so that they can be able to get that and be the best at what they do. And so whatever means to test them to get to them to that goal is what is necessary.
The reason I'm asking about this testing, I remember the time when we were examined at school. It was like testing came very at a later stage. The exams used to be like you have a question, you just pick up a question and you have to answer it.
Yeah.
You have to like have that knowledge, or sometimes it will be like a trick question, so you need to think your way to the answer. There's no like correct answer, like 4 or 3 answers, like in traditional test. So conspiracy part. My conspiracy, I feel like whenever you put
Before you go for a conspiracy question, I have one question for Peter, if you don't mind. Peter, you mentioned that you're working on a startup in education.
Yes.
Are you trying to build a system where it is going to replace the current education system, or is it going to complement, or how does that differentiate the core idea of your startup?
Okay, so that's a very good question, but that's a very big topic. We're very humble. Maybe that's the easiest answer in a nutshell. We certainly want to. Well, our goal is to help families and students solve the difficulties they face in the current system, and for them to be able to access better resources which may not be immediately available, right? And so that's our start. And all of our strategies and actions are geared towards that at the moment. Will we perhaps eventually develop into a point where we become a supplementary system that can supplement or complement existing education system? Perhaps. But at the moment, we're just trying to help certainly local and also immediate friends and families gain resources which they wish before, but they don't have right now.
Cool.
Yeah.
back to my conspiracy.
Yeah.
So the thing that the moment the system decided to give you these 4 answers for the question, I feel like the system doesn't necessarily need you to think. The system wants you just to pass, And what's funny is like a lot of the kids that didn't study as good, for instance, as I did. I was not like an exceptional student, but I was maybe like a little bit better, like a good type of a student. When the testing came, they did better than me in testing because there's a chance of luck, right? You can just choose like, what if it's this?
Yeah.
Very interesting, right? Like, why would the system would choose that approach to, pass the students, get them basic educations, and they're ready for the market. Right?
Yeah. So again, this is a big topic, but I mean, as I think most people have in their experience growing up in education, various classes or systems that they've seen, testing is largely in the form of 3 forms, right? You have your multiple choice, you have your free response question, and this is usually in STEM, right? And you have perhaps some kind of a lab or thing where you have to draw up yourself and you have design, and then you have to collect data, right? And then carry out procedure. Or you can have something like an essay where you have to do and write up your thoughts or something like that. That's the traditional liberal arts education, right? Now, in American high school setting, you also perhaps have wood shop, or you have machinery, right, shop, where you learn how to, at really good schools, like their education systems are well endowed, districts are well endowed, you might have even shops that can teach students how to make an airplane. For example, my high school, when I was growing up, had a shop like that where they taught students that are interested how to use machine tools to build parts of an airplane. So, but Is that still valid for today, right? Yes and no. Depends on what you're trying to do. In the classical sense of training the STEM scientist and the STEM engineer or mathematician, to some degree, that method of the multiple choice and the free response question, like answering a physics question, they give you a setup and you have to use equations, come up with and fudge with it until you get it, right? That's still valid because at the core, what STEM is conducting an experiment, but in your head. Well, how do I mean by this? So let me take a little bit of a detour. This is a big thing to a lot of families here in the Bay Area, right? A lot of them are of engineering backgrounds because we're in the heart of Silicon Valley. A lot of them are, engineers in Silicon Valley, computer scientists and whatnot. So they want their children to do well in STEM. They want them to be able to solve problems and such. But one of the things that are persistently things that we see of students that can't solve these problems is that they can't see how it is. But the analogy I explain to families and to students is that what you're doing, for example, if I give you a physics problem that is asking you what happens when someone pushes a box, right, at a certain angle and pushing this thing forward, it's sort of like learning a craft in a shop and you're working on it, but in your head, with a paper and pen. What do I mean by that? The master craftsman shows you a tool. He says, look, this is a bottle. You open it like this, and then you pour the water out like that, and then you get the water out. This is a property of this thing, which is called a bottle. Okay. American public school education on a test would test you like this. The master craftsman, right, the teacher, first teaches you this is a bottle. I uncap it like this, you twist it like this, and then you pour the water out, and then you get water. This thing is to hold water. On the test, he will draw this with the water, ask you, what is it? What is it supposed to do? All the student has to do is regurgitate, repeat exactly what the master said, twist it, pour it, water comes out, done, 100%, right? But that's not what STEM is. What is STEM? What is the difference between the education you had in the Soviet education system that trained the world's best, some of the best theoretical scientists, right? And they lacked ultimately the American scientific accomplishment because they didn't have the tools, they didn't have the lab apparatuses. But if they had back then in the Soviet Union, you would have a lot of very, very good scientists. What is the difference in the K to 12, like up to high school education in STEM difference? The Soviet or the Asian way of teaching this will be something like this. The teacher first teaches the student and says, this is a bottle. It works like this. You uncap it like this. You twist the side, you uncap it like this. And then you pour it out and the water comes out and you drink from it. This is the property of this thing called a bottle. However, now, once you do that, the master will draw you a picture that says, what is this? Right? That's the first question. The student, of course, has to repeat what exactly it is, what do you do with it. But then he immediately gives the next question, which is, how do I make it such that I can have the water come out, but without uncapping this cap? See, now what is the difference? You have to think about how I can manipulate this thing based on its properties of which I know about, right? And be creative in looking at first principles. This aspect is not happening currently in American schools. And it's because of a couple of things. One, to be able to do that, the teacher has to be very, very skilled himself, right? it's like a craftsman, master craftsman that makes a table. You know, or he knows, of course, what his hammer does, right? What his drill does. But if you ask him to make something creative, like something that's out of the ordinary with a table, he needs to have a certain level of skill. The problem today in American high schools and middle schools and your run-of-the-mill public schools is that they no longer need to be very skilled or knowledgeable or creative. All they have to do is follow a given set of materials given to them by an educational company, such as Pearson, for example, or McGraw-Hill, which gives the teacher the whole question bank, worksheets. They don't have to do anything. They're like a robot. They could just read through. And so, in fact, to a certain degree, American school teachers from K to 12 could very well soon be replaced by AI because of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right?
Okay. Do you teach financial education?
To a certain degree, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What's important and like why do you think it's important to teach people on that?
Good question.
Mm.
So today in the American education system, you have, and we're talking about the most common, let's take the public school system, right? You have your standard traditional course sequence, and you have a thing called an honor sequence, which is it should, in theory, should be a little bit more difficult and should go a little faster and go deeper, right? And then you have a thing called an AP system, advanced placement, which is essentially a way for students to earn college credits before they get into college, right? And so the rigor there should be the same as a college course, theoretically, but some schools are a bit lacking in this regard. But so in terms of understanding money, the only thing that is taught to students in the high school setting is simply economics. Finance is largely absent. And this is a big problem. Why? Because economics doesn't entirely focus on the study of money.
Mm-hmm.
It's more about the study of how to allocate resources. And believe it or not, a lot of the theories that are being taught in high school right now are very outdated. I joke with my students. I say, because I teach them this stuff, and because they're curious and they're interested. And I have a certain background in finance. And I sometimes interject some stuff about finance theories, which they love. But the reality of it is like this, if you can think of it this way. Imagine the economy out there right now, right? With all the inflation and all the mess that's going on. It's like a Tesla, right? But these kids, and even the college students, the first years, the freshmen, what they're studying in school to prepare them to understand what's outside is like first studying the veterinary properties of a horse. They're being trained to be car mechanics, to understand how to fix a Tesla. But they're being taught on how horses work. Now again,
it's very generalized, right?
I'm using an analogy to draw a parallel to a situation. Now, you got to understand a lot of the basic microeconomic theories are based off Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations. That's from the 1700s,
Now I
right?
understand what you're talking about. Okay.
So it's no longer relevant because a lot of the things that are relevant back then is no longer the case now. And as a result, these kids have no idea how money works. They don't even know how to open a bank account, right? Something as simple as opening a checking account. If they work their butt off over a summer, like working or something, right? They can't even open their own bank account. Imagine if they worked their butt off and earned, I don't know, $8,000, right? And they learn how to invest in the stock market, right? And they put it in some kind of index fund. That could get them 5-7% a year on average, right? And by the time that they get out of college, we're talking about, let's say this is the beginning of high school, right? By the time they get out of college or grad school, they can have a significant sum in there just from, compound and cumulative wealth from that. So, this is certainly a problem right now. Versus, let's say, the other side of the world, right? Like, let's say developing countries, right? Maybe post-Soviet countries. Those students know very well how much things are worth. Why? Because they're constantly in touch with that in their daily lives. Here, students, they only know their books, they know their internet, their video games, their homework, and maybe some kind of sports. And that's it. Some kind of meme things or something. They don't understand anything about money. But ultimately, the whole world works on money.
Money. Yeah. You would think, right? But we're learning these sciences. There are like fundamentals and stuff like that. And then one of the most fundamental things in life, everybody is pretty much playing that game, is a game of money.
Yeah.
And how come it's not being like, at least like some sort of tutorial, at least, to like how to money, how to money tutorial.
Yeah.
You only see those on YouTube, but it's not very like it's not embedded in the system, right?
I think now, as somebody that works in education, it's my personal opinion that entrepreneurship should really be taught in middle school and high school. This aspect is much more useful and relevant to a classical liberal education than even economics itself. Why? Because let's think about it for a moment. In order to be an entrepreneur, a successful entrepreneur, right? It's not just understanding how to manage money, right? What are the skill sets that are very important to a successful entrepreneur? He needs to understand how the world really works, right? Because every single day, every decision that he makes, it could be on how to allocate his funds that he has, the startup funds that he might have, or how to get money, right? So that he can continue his operations, how to hire people, who to hire, and where to invest his resource and to pick what kind of business model to take. All those things require a very realistic understanding of how the world works. It's literally black and white here. If he's not being real, he will fail, right? So why is this very important? Because if somebody's trained to think, again, I reemphasize this, the whole point of a successful, really good K-12 basic education system is to teach the student how to think correctly. This is like a social science lab, if you will. If he fails as an entrepreneur, right, he literally sees that whatever he thought was true is false. If his ideas work and he becomes a successful entrepreneur, that not only means that he made money as a successful business person, but it also means his theories about how the world worked, and that could be who will buy his product, who are the right people that he should hire to get him to accomplish his goals. Those theories were all correct. So it's a cumulative effect, right? So this is why you have so many people who want to be entrepreneurs, but not many people actually succeed. It's not because they lack money sense per se. It's that they may lack a cumulative, comprehensive understanding of how the world works.
Question for you.
Yes.
Being a developed country as United States,
Yeah.
why do you think this is not included in the education system of teaching kids about finance and how they can grow their portfolios from the start?
Yeah, good question. Again, this goes back to history, because the current system that is in the public school system, first of all, let's differentiate this a little bit. Private school system, especially a lot of the religious schools, like Catholic schools, some of them are actually quite better than public schools. It's because of funding. They don't rely so much on public funding, right? And so therefore they're not restricted to to rules and regulations that are restrictive on public schools, right? So they don't have to reform their school system, right? And this is why a lot of the private schools, especially the Catholic schools, they actually retain a lot of the rigor that was back in the 1950s and 60s. They didn't go through the educational reforms, and that's why they are better now than the public schools. But regardless of public or private, the Western educational model in the K to 12 sense is largely based off the Greek system and the early classical Greek system, which focused on teaching students how to reason in STEM and math and logic, right? And logic was eventually turned into rhetoric, right? This is debate. And later then became humanities and the arts and such. Money and understanding how money works, even since that time period, was not something that was considered something that would enrich the soul. And therefore, the Greeks, ancient Greeks, did not put that into their curriculum when they trained young men. They wanted to train young men who are good citizens and who can protect their republic, and who are rational and reasonable, right? So that was the goal of their education system. And so they didn't believe that understanding money and how money works and how to start successful businesses is something that was necessarily important for them back then. Most of them were farmers at that time. Right? And so this Western tradition carried forward to today with the influence of the Renaissance and whatnot. It ultimately wasn't just an important aspect that they put into the classical education system.
This is a very amazing explanation I've ever heard. What you just described, I always used to think that this is a conspiracy, that why kids are not being taught in colleges anywhere in the world about finances so that they can be controlled pretty easily by suppressing them financially. But the way you explained this makes more sense now, because we have developed as a society over a period of time. And if we go back to history, and this is the exact current time that things needs to be changed, and what you are doing is remarkable. I really commend that.
Thank you.
I've heard it's also like this system was developed during the industrial age.
Yes, the STEM education system was, but again, understand everything is an evolution, not a complete cut and break away from the previous. So, in the ancient Greek days, the times of Aristotle, they had certainly understandings of natural science, and they would teach their boys in the form of rhetoric, in the form of debates, in a philosophical sense, on understanding the natural world, right? So that's certainly there. And the Greeks, and one of the very important things, actually, that is a hallmark of Western classical education is the importance of physical education. This aspect is something that, to my knowledge, is not as emphasized in the other civilizations.
Like sports.
Sports, exactly. So the ancient Greeks believed that when you exercise your brain through rhetoric and logic and debates, you must simultaneously exercise your brain, your muscles. Because if a young man grows up where he's very strong in the brain but very weak in the muscles, they believe this young man will become dark, like internally, where he becomes very cowardly because he's very weak physically, but he's very strong, so he's very ambitious. But he's not ultimately he's not strong enough to be virtuous enough eventually to be able to accomplish his goals and to serve his community as a good citizen. And so that's why they firmly believe this since the Greek days, that young men, when they're growing up, they should be taught in how to reason through logic and debate, at the same time be physically strong. This is a foundation of righteousness for their society.
Do you guys offer that?
Sorry?
Do you guys offer that too?
Well, I mean, we help the students hook them up onto the sports clubs and help them find the right resources to get access to that. But
you kind of how do you say you make that important point that
yeah, and this is something that is very important, especially for our area, because again, a lot of the families here are of ethnic backgrounds, right? And a lot of them are scientists, engineers. The culture is just that they want to make sure their kids can be very strong in the academics, but they don't value the importance of physical education.
Yeah.
But, again, I tell all the families this, which is that understand the system you're trying to win in right now, the STEM, the physics, the chemistry, and the hard calculus and all that, it was designed in the very beginning as a complementary set where the other half is rigorous physical education as well. So both must come hand in hand.
That makes sense. I like the way you mentioned that if you're not if you're strong mentally but not physically, there's a danger.
Yeah, and also, I mean, it's just very directly, if you look around at even the Ivy League campuses, right, or even elite college campuses today, Johns Hopkins and whatnot, most of the students at least jog every day. When you do something like that, even some minimal amount of exercise, it helps you focus better in class as well.
Cycling is
blood,
big, right?
Yeah, blood flows better. You can pay attention better. You have more stamina. And then you can handle solving hard problems for 6 hours better.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I have a question.
Yeah.
I've been asking. I'm trying to incorporate into my podcast. So, if you were told to make $1 million in 1 year, and if you don't make it, you will die.
Okay.
From zero, how would you approach that problem?
Well, first of all, I'm not responsible for the ideas, right? Just simply for fun.
It's just like the mental exercise. It's. I'm curious to hear different people's opinions, and it looks like the more I ask different people, I get completely different responses all the time.
Yeah. Sure. Well, I would first as somebody that knows a lot about finance, knows a lot about investments, knows a lot about economics, I will first take the safe approach and say that let's look at what everybody else is doing, right? Especially in this country. Why do I say that? Because again, let's go to first principles. Everybody, no matter it was in the 1700s, in the very beginning, or now, came to this country to either seek personal freedom or to make money. This simply being real, right? Most of the institutions in this country is geared towards facilitating those two goals. And as a result of that, the economy in this country has essentially developed towards those goals. So look at what everybody else is doing right now. What are the hottest things in this country right now that people are doing? Finance, right? That's New York. Northeast, that's the epicenter. Connecticut is where all the hedge funds are, right? They still are, but things kind of shuffled a little bit in recent years. But Greenwich's got its old money, right? Hedge funds, and New York's got all the private equity funds and big banks and whatnot. Then you have energy, right? Down in Texas, and you have them in the Dakotas, right? And then you have tech here. So these are the epicenters or the pillars of the economies, right? And why is that? Simply for that reason. Those fields are the ones where you can make the money the quickest.
Okay.
And let me elaborate on this. Ultimately, as an economist, in that sense, if I were to go on that route, this is not good for the overall economy, but it's good for the personal interest. What do I mean by that? Look at a hedge fund trader, let's say, right? He may have some algorithmic trading algorithm, right? He has some whiz computer scientist along with his top trader. They cooked up together, right? And they can beat the market in milliseconds on each trade, right? So in the course of a day, trading day, that algorithm can make, many, 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 many different trades way faster than any human can, and way more rational than any human can. And imagine now, right? Let's say that you're trading with $10 million, right? Or let's make it simple, $1 million. If I trade on even a fluctuation of 1 cent, right? Or a couple cents, 2 or 3 cents, that's a lot of money in these micro trades, right? So, let's say, let's look at this. So if I have a 1% gain, right, in a single trade on 1 million, right? So that's a significant amount of money. Now, in the same token, let's say that you're a farmer. You're I don't know, you're a farmer in Burma or something. You're a farmer in Vietnam. To make the same amount of money in gains in 1 year off of 5-acre land of produce where he worked night and day trying to plant his seeds and buy his seeds and rely on the weather, to make that same amount of revenue, the trader sitting comfortably in his office in Midtown Manhattan can do that in 1 second. And he didn't even do it. The algorithm did it for him, right? So there's a reason why here in the States, there are these 3 epicenters of where the economy is leaning on. This is where it's the quickest way for you to make money, right? So if you think along those lines, right, conceivably you can make the most money quickest with the amount of endowment that you put down, right? And the other thing I tell some of my students this is, of course, caveat is you shouldn't do this, but of course, to answer your question, this is something that
it's just like a mental exercise. Like for you personally, like
Yeah.
if you would they say you would die in 1 year.
Yeah.
You have to make $1 million. How would you approach that?
Well, I might give it away as a charity because I'm a religious person, and I think ultimately my chances of seeking an afterlife is much more worthwhile than say my returns in $1 million on
it's
in
not
this
a
world.
philosophical
But
question as to what you do with the money. It's the like, I guess it's a thought process. Like, you say like I need to make $1 million
Yeah.
within 1 year. Like
Yeah.
at the end of the year.
yeah,
Like from this day, and then like the same day next year, you have to have $1 million no matter what. What will be the approach? That's the question.
so there are certain principles you should follow. One, you should certainly do the things you're best at.
Okay.
And then you should look at your resources. What do you have in terms of available resources that you can command at the moment? Go along those lines and then find the thing that you're best at and you have the highest chance of succeeding at, right? And also try to lower transaction costs. So for example, something like trading versus being a farmer, right? In Vietnam.
We're talking about like stock trading.
Yeah, like
trading.
And also it should be very easy to facilitate this, right? So in that along that line of thinking, something online versus something brick and mortar, right? Opening up a Macy's is not as good as opening an Amazon, right? Because you cut down on warehousing and inventory and all that, right? Like in a very basic sense, it's much
Something
easier structure like
scalable,
that.
right?
Yeah. Also something that can quickly scale based on peer-to-peer marketing. And again, there's other aspect, which is,
But I'm sorry, by peer-to-peer marketing is when people spread your word.
right,
Peer-to-peer.
something that can
Okay.
that can spread very
Like a
quickly
viral-
like that.
viral
Yes,
thing.
yes,
Okay.
like that, right. And something that, and I'll also look at culture. I think culture matters a lot. Why do I say that? So, for example, to a perhaps a European or Western audience, right? It might not be it may be a bit incomprehensible that, for example, an East Asian parent would be willing to pay 30 to 40% of their income to ensure that their child has a good education. This is cultural, right? And that's just, it's not entirely rational in that sense. And on the flip side, you might pitch the same idea to a farmer in a developing country, and you tell them, here in our area, people pay 50% of their income on rent alone, right? They think this is nuts, right? So again, it's about culture. Culture should be a consideration here. What do people prefer? And this is very important. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's ultimately no magical bullet, but
Yeah. I understand there's no magical bullet. I understand a lot of the business approaches, or like even this in the tech, even though there's a lot of money, there's like not a lot of startups just make millions of dollars in 1 year, right? It takes a lot of time before they exit, right? Usually like 5-10 years before exit happens. Like you like the most success stories that you hear. I mean, you get to hear some of the exceptions that get viral very quickly, but those are not rules. Those are exceptions, right?
most startups fail in the first
Most
year.
startup fails, absolutely. A 90,
Yeah.
99% or something. Yeah. Yeah. This is my thought exercise. Is just like, if I were to make 1 million in 1 year, like right now, no matter like this is like situation that's happened like this, and then like resources at my disposal are very minimal. What would be my approach without like breaking law, right? And then
That should be number one.
yeah. I mean, yeah, I've heard just some people say, you're probably going to have to break bad and stuff like that. I'm like, well, that's interesting that you bring that up. That's your thought process. Like, you think there's no other way in this system that you can
Well,
use?
hold on. So let's take a look at what you just said, right? If I understand correctly, you took that film Breaking Bad, right?
He said break bad, meaning that I have to do something like illegal, right? That's how I took it. Yeah.
Well, what I'm saying is there was a show called Breaking Bad,
Yes, I know that.
which is about the guy that sold drugs, right? But if we take, everything aside, the show aside, and just look at the business model of that and why it succeeded, there's a few very crucial components in that, which are what? One, absolutely infinite demand. Right? That is a product which, if you buy once, you're hooked on. You cannot not want it.
It's the best in the market.
Sure, but and also for him selling that, his customers, once they have that product once, they can't get off of it anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
Because it was the purest on the market.
And I'm just saying the product in general, drugs. Right, you have it once, you're hooked. You can't have it.
What I'm saying is, compared to other drugs on the market for that movie, he has the purest product. He
Right.
has the best product on the market.
Right. So
Yeah.
that's the secondary aspect of his success. First thing, most important, because ultimately all business is supply and demand. There's somebody that needs something, which usually it was not recognized by the rest of the society, and you're the person that best solved his problem by satisfying the demand at the cheapest price that he can afford. Right? Like he's willing to pay to get his problem solved. If you can do those two things, you are for sure going to succeed for the most part. Right? So that's a basic principle. Now, you ideally want to find a demand which is insatiable, but still not something illegal. Right? And so I use that example of education, whereas, and this is cultural, for a Asian community, for example, education is almost like drugs. People really want education for their good education for their kids, right? So they're willing to go crazy and pay 30 to 40% so that they can provide a good education for their next generation. And in that sense, this is a demand that's very, very deep and very, very large. So if we use that analogy, right, of what you said of Breaking Bad selling drugs, it's almost like in the same vein, right?
Okay.
In that sense.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's about finding that demand and then asking yourself this question, can I be the best in the game? Given and provided that what you're doing is legal, you're not harming anybody else, and you're not harming yourself, and you can do this ethically, morally, can you be the best in the game? Some people cannot, right? They see the opportunity, but they cannot. And some people think they can. Well, if they can, then they will become Breaking Bad,
Yep.
right?
All right. Yeah. I think I can take that answer. That
Yeah.
makes sense. Okay. Thank you for that. All right. So we've been recording exactly for 1 hour.
Yeah, it's almost 1 hour and 3 minutes.
Nice. Thank you. This is about a good time, I think, to end today's talk.
Okay.
Thank you very much for coming.
Thank
Really
you.
nice. I like the way the confidence.
Hey, you're
Thank
talking really good, Peter. I
Nice.
really enjoyed your conversation.
Appreciate it.
Great.
All right.
I really enjoyed it as well. Thanks for letting me in. Let me have this opportunity to talk.
Yeah. You can stop rolling.